Hello, thank you very much for coming to this session. The description in the booklet is climate change and fuel poverty. We're delighted that the PCS union have shown great interest in coming to participate in this Fringe meeting. We could just as easily have called it energy, really, because this is the element of climate change that we are going to kick off the conversation with, at least, and that might develop later on through the conversation. I'm going to ask you, we normally, Peter Murray, who's Secretary of the Green Party Trade Union Group, normally films speakers when we've got guests, and he would like to film the Q&A at the end if anyone, if everyone is sort of happy with that. And if you're not happy with that, if you can indicate, and we make sure that we don't film you or we edit you out. We also have a photographer who wants to take some snaps for the record, which might go into party publicity and stuff. So if you're not happy, maybe because you're rolling work or something like that, or any other reason, you don't want to be seen in the photograph, if you'd like to indicate that now. Anyone worried about that? And we'll make sure that that's not an embarrassment or difficulty for you. Okay, everybody seems relaxed about that, Peter, so that's fine. Thank you. Climate change, fuel poverty, a serious factor since the banking crisis, and the cost of living has risen. So many jobs have been lost, and unemployment figures have been high. We know this across Europe as well. But cost of energy has become ever more large as a portion of people's incomes, whether they're in work, low-paid work, or whether they are struggling with our benefit system. Tackling energy and the way that we demand a new vision for providing energy for the future years is an essential political debate that we must have, and it's one that is not being properly supported by the mainstream other parties, whether it be Labour, Lib Dem, or Tories. I won't mention the others. But the Green Party has for many years developed quite robust policies. We work alongside other groups outside the party and other trade unions who are developing more progressive policies, looking at climate science, doing the research, funding some research. Other groups like the Campaign Against Climate Change and their trade union group, members of the Green Party have been working with them for years, having a look at practical alternatives that we can have that will reduce our need to rely on fossil fuels. We've been building the debate about the future of work with the trade unions and how that can affect industry as well. But the fact of affordability of our energy and the fact that we're still addicted to fossil fuel is a major, major problem and something preventing us from tackling the crisis of climate change. I always like to persuade people, some of you may know this well, to have a look at Bill McGibbon's article, which is a bit Americanly called Do the Math. There's an article in Rolling Stone which you can just go search on your website and have a full read of it. But within that article, Do the Math, there are three figures that he picks out. One is that there was serious consensus about making sure that we don't go beyond 2 degrees C warming. And that's something that everybody agreed with. They couldn't agree about anything else. They couldn't agree how to start cutting things. They couldn't agree about what nations should do more or what other nations should be supported because they're developing their economies. Couldn't agree about anything else but the 2 degrees C. No argument about that. And then the second figure that he talks about is the 565 gigatons, which is the estimated amount that humans can add of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere by mid-century and still have some reasonable hope, might be a bit optimistic to be honest, but some reasonable hope looking at the facts and figures, to keep us just below that 2 degrees C. So 565 gigatons capacity up there for us to be on track not to completely destroy our main planet Earth home for the wide biodiversity and the human planet as we know it. But the third figure that he talks about is 2,795 gigatons, and I'll explain that. This number came from a group called the Carbon Tracker Initiative. This is not from some climate scientists, this is not from Greens, this is not from hippies and environmentalists very worried about looking after our planet. These are serious figures put together by a body that's there to support people investing their money, trying to get a good rate of return, and wondering when to shift it into what. And they had a look at fossil fuel markets, etc. And it's a London financial analyst group, and they published a report in an effort to educate their investors about the possible risks that climate change poses to their stock portfolios. In short, what they've looked at is the amount of fossil fuels already discovered, already existing as assets on the bank balances of different owners around the planet, and the planned fossil fuels that we have ready to burn, 2,795 gigatons, which is 5 times higher than the total maximum capacity that we dare release if we are going to have a chance of keeping below 2 degrees C. So these are the scary figures. And then on top of that, as we know, and many of you are involved with, they're still trying to find more access to fossil fuels, such as fracking. Not only is it so disastrous for local communities, dangerous for our waterways, smelly, horrible, destructive of local countryside, possibly poisonous to water aquifers, etc. But on top of that, it's more fossil fuels that we don't need, and that must stay in the ground. So on that note, I am going to sit down and be quiet and enjoy hearing from Clara Paillard from PCS. She's got loads of other titles. She works with the TUC as well. She will remind us of those. We've worked together on anti-fracking things, helping to persuade Unite, the union, at their policy conference to withdraw one of their motions that said fracking's going to happen, let's prepare our workforce for it, and let's be practical. They withdrew that in the end, and they're all positively campaigning against fracking from now on, which is absolutely amazing. Clara is a powerhouse of strength in her campaigning work. So Clara will tell us about PCS, all the research they've done, the campaigns they're involved with. And then Howard Thorp, who is our Green Party of England and Wales National Campaigns Co-ordinator with a seat on our GPEX, which is the Green Party National Executive. He will just tie in, because we've got some new members, bits of policy that we already have to do with energy or climate change as the discussion develops. And then we'll open it up to the floor and bring in ideas, thoughts, questions that you have to finish up the session from there. So I'm quite looking forward to that. So thank you very much, and thank you very much everyone for coming to this session today. Okay, Clara Paillard.
Hi everybody. I actually work for National Museums Liverpool, where I'm a rep in this museum, but I also sit on the National Executive Committee of PCS and the president of the culture sector in PCS, representing museums and galleries. PCS represents sales. We've got 250,000 members across the country, and we've got a long track record of engaging union members on environmental issues. In the last 10 years, we've adopted an anti-nuclear policy. We created the role of environmental reps or green reps in the workplace. We opposed the expansion of airports in favour of rail. And we've developed the 1 million climate jobs strategy with the campaign against climate change and other unions. This year, we've adopted a clear anti-fracking policy calling for a moratorium, and we also call to support the nationalization of the energy sector. And energy is, the key words. It's one of the key issues at the moment that must be on the agenda of the general election. It's about oil, it's about coal, it's about gas, but it's also about the energy-intensive industries where trade unions have got many members working there, such as steel, glass, chemicals, etc. And I'm just going to tell you a little story about Runcorn, lovely city Runcorn if you've never been. Really polluted town, really. But it's also got a lot of industry, including the chemical giant Ineos. Ineos got the biggest chemical plant in Europe in Runcorn. And the boss of this company, Ineos, is called Jim Ratcliffe. Some of you may have come across him. He's actually on the rich list in the UK. He's a billionaire. And his plant in Runcorn. Pardon?
What's the name of the company?
Ineos. And the plant in Runcorn uses as much electricity as the entire city of Liverpool. The cost of energy, therefore, it's crucial for that plant. And this Jim Ratcliffe had a genius idea. He thought, why don't I produce my own electricity? Save me a bit of money. And actually, can I make a bit of profit out of it as well? Brilliant idea. How did he do that? Well, he's burning waste. He's built his own waste incinerator. So he's charging city councils to, per each ton of waste he's burning. And he produces free electricity for his chemical plant. And on top of that, he's making profits. That's a really clever guy, isn't he? But when you think about it, what a scandal. Absolute scandal. Not only is diverting from recycling, because you need an amount of plastic for the waste to produce energy, but the emission from the plants, the toxic waste, have an impact on the health of the local population. It's already a polluted area with high level of asthma. There's an increase in traffic, noise, smell. How can this be legal? How can Jim continue to make profit and nobody buys on? I don't like Jim, as you can figure it out. And the other reason I don't like him is he's also got an oil refinery in Scotland, in Grangemouth. And some of you may have heard last year when Jim threatened to close the plant and sack 500 workers who work in his refinery. They were all Unite members. And in the end, he didn't close the plant and the people kept their jobs, but he changed their terms and conditions, really affecting their pay, their pensions, etc. And what we found out a few weeks ago, in Grangemouth, the plant he wanted to close, is now going to try to extract shale gas and frack. So it's like a little circle of people who have got their fingers in lots of energy areas. And I think this is really important because the role of corporations in climate change is massive. 2/3 of all the greenhouse gas ever emitted since the Industrial Revolution have been caused by 100 companies in the world. 100 companies causing 2/3 of all the emissions in the last 150 years. And it's the same scandal when we come to the UK energy companies. The big six and the monopolies they've got on our energy. They dominate everything and control our lives. Energy bosses are now more hated than bankers. And why? Because their profit increased by 73% between 2009 and 2012. 73%. Over the same period, the average dual fuel bill increased by 24%. So the consequence of those excessive bills, combined with inadequate insulation of homes, means that millions of people have got to choose between heating their home and eating food. And in the UK, which is one of the richest countries in the world, every year 25,000 people die of the cold winter. What a disgrace. An absolute disgrace. So we must reclaim the power. Joke. Power. Because this is not just about reclaiming the energy, but it's also a question of democracy, which is very important. And what we need is to bring back the energy sector into public ownership. 66% of the population is actually agreeing with that proposal. PCS has developed the 1 million climate job strategy with Campaign Against Climate Change and the TSSA union, which is a transport union. UCU university lecturers, and the CWU, the communication workers. Now we've got the FBU, the fire brigades, and Unite have come on board, and we're launching the new pamphlet on the 20th of September in London. Most of you will know about the 1 million climate job strategy, but I just want to touch on it, because this is not about any green jobs. This is about an economic strategy to tackle unemployment, the economic crisis, and the climate crisis at the same time. This is about public investment, public services, and public sector jobs. The market simply cannot solve this problem. We cannot leave it to the market. Only the public sector will be able to tackle this. So what we propose to create is a national climate service. Like we created the NHS in 1945 after the Second World War, there was a great need in society for a national health service. We're saying today there is an emergency, we need a national climate service. 1 million jobs in renewable energy, in public transport, in recycling, in agriculture, in education, and in building a mass building of affordable, sustainable, insulated homes to solve the housing crisis and tackle fuel poverty. PCS is working with different organizations like Fuel Poverty Action. And since our conference in May, we voted to support civil disobedience against fracking and fuel poverty. We invited the Fuel Poverty Action to our Green Reps Forum this year and done some training with them and some activities. And we've submitted a motion on fuel poverty at the Women TUC last March as well. And for PCS members, fuel poverty is an everyday issue. Our pay has been frozen for the past 4 years. And it means in real terms, it's a pay cut of 10%. So many of our members who work for the public actually live in not just fuel poverty, but food poverty and other types of poverties. So we are seeking to influence political parties on a number of issues, but in particular on environmental issues. And we believe that the privatization of public services must be reversed. It's a big challenge, even in the trade union movement, because a number of unions are quite nervous and sitting on the fence on the issue of energy, because they represent, thousands of workers in the sector. I'm just going to give you a couple of things on the issue of fracking and trade union, because this is an ongoing debate in the TUC, really important, and Congress starts today at 4 o'clock, and there will be debate on that. Romayne touched on the issue of Unite, and I just want to give a few more details because this is really interesting. Actually, I represented PCS at a fracking meeting organized by the TUC back in May. It was a very small meeting, really select, and we had the Department for the Environment and Climate Change there, we had the Health and Safety Executive, and we had the Environmental Agency. And we had a number of presentations on fracking, supposedly to give us the facts. Interestingly, the DEC representative was quoting the famous Institute of Directors report and the 50,000 jobs. And when I asked him who sponsored that report, he was like, nobody. I said, Quadrilla actually sponsored that report. And he had to admit it was true. But if he wouldn't have told us that, using pieces of research that are completely frauded. And then we went to the Health and Safety Executive. And if it wasn't so worrying, it would have been funny, because he was giving us a list of all the regulations in place, etc. But every time you look at the small print, just told you that the whole system was a lie. For example, they've got the so-called independent well examiners. So, all right, they are here to check the security of wells. Independent, what does that mean? Actually, the small print say independent of direct line management. They all work for the fracking companies. What a scandal. And actually, this is exactly the same in the nuclear industry, by the way. But, just showing that it's not independent at all. They are using chemicals. They pump chemical with the water into the ground. The formula of chemical, we're being told, is commercially sensitive. So we can't know what's the formula. Okay, they say, oh, you can have the list of chemicals, but I don't know about you, but when I did chemistry at school, and you mix chemicals, it's not the same as two chemicals separately. So what's important is to know exactly what the formula is. And so this is not subject to freedom of information. Also, they are publishing, the companies are supposed to publish weekly reports to tell us what's going on. However, those reports are also confidential and cannot be shared with the public. So what's the point of even publishing the report if we cannot see it? At the moment, when you want to frack, you've got to go through a number of planning applications, environmental applications. It's quite a complex process. What do? They call it red tape, and they want to get rid of it. So they're planning to streamline the application to frack, to make it easier for companies, and obviously, giving less guarantee to the public that it would be controlled. And they've also got those inspectors that are supposed to inspect the sites. When I asked how many inspections are actually taking place, one in Blackpool when the earthquake happened. Yes. Absolutely ridiculous. It's a real joke. Anyway, I think Unite was present at that meeting, and they had representatives from the energy sector, and it was clear that from the energy sector point of view, they work with the industry. And when their conference happened, there were 3 motions calling for the moratorium, calling to stop fracking, saying that members should refuse to deliver goods to the fracking sites, etc., etc. And then you had the energy sector motion that actually said the regulations are in place. They were at the meetings. They know it's not true. So I was so pleased to see that actually democracy prevailed, and the entire conference of Unite the Union actually turned around their own executive and change the regulation. The biggest union in Europe has now got policies that clearly call for a moratorium on fracking. That's going to help change things, I can promise you. Sorry, I have to that's a really good point. In terms of the TUC policy, in 2012, we managed to pass the principle of precaution. Because it should be that until it's proven safe, it shouldn't happen. Something shouldn't happen. We know that even if it was safe, we don't want it because it's emitting more than the coal power plants actually, because it produces methane. So it's even worse than coal. We better have burned coal than have fracking. That's the reality of it. This year, PCS has put an amendment on one of the motions from the FBU about climate change and floods. We put an amendment that is calling for debate within the TUC, consulting the affiliates, including on the possibility of a moratorium, because a number of other unions, are really nervous about this. So hopefully this amendment will go through. In conclusion, I'm going to take you back to my workplace, museums, because some of you may have realized that oil companies are trying to rebuild their reputations by sponsoring museum exhibitions. You may have seen that BP is actually sponsoring a number of things in Tate. They are currently the key sponsor in the Viking exhibition in the British Museum. What a disgusting thing. And in July, you may have heard in the news that there is a new proposition to privatize 2/3 of the staff at the National Gallery. PCS has started a campaign. We've got a petition that's reached 7,000 signatures. I'll encourage you to sign it, and because we're aiming for 100,000 because we're going to stop that privatization. And what is really interesting, and it illustrates how corrupt the corporate world is. In the last 18 months, 10 of the senior staff at the National Gallery have either resigned or been sacked. There's a new HR director running the show, together with a security consultant from the outside, advising the National Gallery on privatization. And this guy used to work for G4S Security while they were running the Olympics. He was an operation manager there. So big failure there. The guy formed his own little company, security consultancy, brought in the National Gallery, recommending privatization. Next thing, one of his mates is going to get the contract. Absolutely scandalous. And on the 14th of October, there are a number of unions who would go on strike. PCS is considering if we will join Unite, Unison, and GMB, who will be on strike in local governments. We may join that date. On the 14th of October, it's the opening of the Rembrandt exhibition at the National Gallery. And guess what? The Rembrandt exhibition will be manned by only private security staff from the company CSI. And they will also be sponsored by Shell. What a disgrace. So I can tell you, there is lots of things we can work on together with the Green Party and trade unions. And hopefully, in both of our grouping, you need to argue for trade union rights. You need to argue to work with trade unions. And in trade union, we need to argue to tackle climate change and work with the like of the Green parties to change things. Because together, we'll win. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
How many staff did you say have been sacked from the National Gallery in the last 10 months?
10 senior staff have either resigned or been sacked in the last 18 months.
We will have we'll have time at the end, and we will come back on all these points. And so, if you've got questions, we make little notes of them, and we'll come back and do the Q&A at the end of this session. I'm going to ask Howard Thorp, who, as I said before, some of you have just come in since then. He's our National Campaigns Co-ordinator with a seat on the Green Party Executive, which is known as GPEX for any new members who are here. And Howard will put this sort of campaigning and climate change and energy issues into sort of Green Party policy context for us, I think.
Yeah, I excuse me if I don't stand up because I've got sciatica at the moment and it hurts if I stand for any length
Not
of
a
time.
problem, don't worry.
Sorry, can I just make one suggestion? I don't know if you can...
I don't really want interruptions, so can we do this at the end?
No,
Unless
no,
there's
it
something
was-
about
it
hearing
was-
technical
it was-
things.
Yes, because of your involvement with museums, and next door was talking about arts funding and cuts, it would be very appropriate if you could be there for 5 minutes to give them the business about what's happened in the museums. It's so important.
Well, maybe
the link
if
is
we
so
end
great.
early and Clara could pop in just at the end, but we need her here for the session.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Yeah, on the